Welcome to Manitoba Possible. Hello and welcome to this talk on Autism Spectrum Disorder, Communication Strategies for the Childcare Centre. This video is part 2. We recommend that you have watched part 1 before you watch this one. This video will focus on communication issues and strategies for children who are not yet talking in your childcare centre. My name is Erin Crawford and I'm a registered speech-language pathologist.
And I'm Corrine Daymond, also a registered speech-language pathologist.
And we work for Manitoba Possible with the Provincial Outreach Therapy for Children program. We see preschool children at childcare centres and homes throughout Winnipeg, northern and rural areas of Manitoba. Here is what we'll be discussing in this video today. We will get to information on sensory issues, ways to play, techniques and strategies, and what to look out for and when to refer kids for speech-language pathology services. So what is communication? It's how we exchange information and ideas, and it is multimodal. We communicate in many different ways. We use technology, body language, sign language, writing, our posture. We use pictures. We use all these forms all day long. We point, we do facial expressions, we write, we read, we text, we email, and then verbally we ask and answer questions, comment, and move our bodies to transfer info and ideas back and forth with other people. 93% of communication is actually nonverbal. So our kids who are not yet using words are likely using or can be taught to use that 93%. So for our early communicators who are not yet speaking, what do they kind of look like? Well, they're not yet intentionally sending messages. They may be coming close to you, looking at what they want, smiling at you. They may do some reaching for what they're interested in. They're often using their mouth to explore their toys and their hands, maybe even chewing on their clothing. You'll see them use their bodies and physical moves to communicate. They may be bouncing around when they want to go jump on the trampoline, or they may push away their food when they don't want any more. You'll see these kids playing on their own most of the time and need a lot of help to join play with others. They're usually not using toys functionally yet, so they might be playing in unusual ways with toys. You'll find that we do a lot of guessing with these kids at this stage, trying to figure out what they're thinking about and what they're trying to get across to us. The later nonverbal communicators are now starting to send some messages on purpose to us. These are the kids that you'll find will take you by the hand and lead you to what they want. So they're using their body and their behavior to get their needs met. They'll also bring you things from other parts of the house or the daycare, wanting things to be opened for them or to be fixed, or for buttons to be pushed that they can't do on their own. You'll find that they're starting to point or maybe starting to reach to things that they want, but they can't get on their own. They might start doing a bit of looking at you and then looking at what they want and then looking back at you again. That's what we call joint attention, and it's very important for communication skills later on. These kids are starting to be able to imitate our actions, or they might even be able to imitate some simple sign language from us, like all done signs or more or eat. You'll find that they're usually still not using recognizable words, but maybe making lots of noises and sounds that are getting close. Their play may be starting to get a little more functional, using the toy in expected ways, but usually still on their own. We're doing a lot of interpreting, trying to figure out what they want, but a little bit less full-on guessing.
So although we usually think of sensory integration as an occupational therapy area, we need to talk a little bit about it today to understand how we take in sensory information and how we can use these sensory preferences to build language. So let's start with sight and how we take in visual information. In your centers, you may see children lining up their toys, such as blocks, cars, trains, pieces of the train track, and even laying down on the floor to look at them in different angles. Others may be flapping their hands or fingers or other items such as sticks and watching them move as they flip. Some like to watch items fall off the tables or ledges. These children are all seeking visual input. On the other side of this is the children that become upset when the room gets too visually busy, or even after a certain amount of time in a room full of visual input, such as lots of toys being around, too many children in their space. They're all avoiding the sensory input. So hearing. When it comes to auditory input, we usually think of children who can't tolerate too much noise. Individuals with autism often have difficulty filtering what is important and what is not. So sounds like the humming of a fan. That's a sound that most of us just dismiss, but that can become very overwhelming for people with autism. This again is when we see children becoming upset or crying when a room is too loud. And it may not always be an immediate sign. They may be able to tolerate the noise for a certain period of time, and then it just becomes too much. And then you see crying or meltdowns, which come and seem to be out of nowhere. You may notice the child putting their hands over their ears. And to make things complicated, this is not just a sign of too much input. So sometimes children may put their hands on their ears in order to muffle the sound and change the way the sound enters their system. So if you put your hands on your ears and talk, it sounds completely different when you move your hands away. Some of the children like to listen to this and listen to their own voice as well. So they are seeking the auditory input. Dropping things on the floor or banging toys may also be a sign of auditory seeking. Tactile. This is our sense of touch. So this is not only with our hands, but any of our body parts. Tactile seeking may be seen as putting toys or objects in their mouth, or children that love water, sand, or any of the sensory tables that I see in various centers. They also love Play-Doh, finger painting. They're seeking out getting their hands dirty. Children may also avoid these same activities, so they may not want to have any part of the sand table or the Play-Doh or finger painting and may avoid those activities. You may have some children in your centers that are constantly trying to remove their socks or shoes. These are the children that don't like their toques and their mitts on in the winter time, or even other clothing items, and they may be seen trying to take their shirts or their pants off. This is due to the fact that they're overly sensitive to materials or maybe the tags on their clothes. So maybe some children can wear sweatpants, but they're not able to wear jeans. And if they have jeans on that day, you may see them trying to take them off. The vestibular system. So our vestibular system is in our inner ear and is responsible for motion, spatial orientation, and balance. It allows us to stay upright when we are sitting, standing, or moving. So children who are seeking more vestibular input may enjoy spinning or rocking, hanging upside down. This may be why some of the children in your centers are constantly running and climbing as well. Proprioception. This is the sense of self-movement and body position. It is directed by the nerves in your muscles, tendons, and joints. So children seeking this kind of sensory input are the ones walking on their tiptoes, crashing and banging into things, or head banging. They may chew on objects like anything that is deep pressure, such as hugs. These are the children that don't seem to know how much pressure to use when building blocks or when writing. So if they're building blocks, they will slam the blocks down. Or when they're writing, they will push really hard when they're trying to write with things. These activities can either be alerting to their system or calming to their system. Sense of smell. This is a very, very powerful sense. I've seen children that need to smell everything they pick up. Both lack of smell can affect eating or too much smell. So if you can't smell the food, it may not be pleasing to you. But on the other hand, if the smell is too strong, it may be too overwhelming to eat. So this is partly one of our reasons why several of our children with autism have eating issues and are very picky eaters. The other sense that, of course, builds into that, the feeding issues, is taste. So they may be seeking things out again. So this is where you may see children putting everything in their mouth to see what it tastes like. On the other hand, they may be avoiding things. So you may have them not eating a high variety of foods. I've had children that only eat crackers and cheese, and that's the only two things that they will eat. So this builds into our picky eaters. So as you can see, we can become overstimulated or understimulated by various sensory input. Overstimulation is obviously when you've taken in too much and you can't handle it. Understimulation is when your child is seeking out input in a variety of ways. Our goal is to help our children reach the just right state of arousal so they can make sense of their world and be able to learn. The first step in good communication is engagement. When we seek engagement, we often try to get children to play with a toy they like along with us. For many children, shifting attention from a toy to us is very difficult. So they will just keep attention on the toy and ignore us. In order to get some engagement with these children, we need to start with people games or games without toys. So we took a look at the 7 senses. Now we need to be a sensory detective to see what our children are gravitating towards. We need to choose activities they like and turn them into interactive games. For example, some of our children that like to run, we can turn that into a chasing game. Instead of just running around by themselves, start chasing them. So first you will start by chasing them in a fun way using words like, I'm going to get you, and gotcha when you catch them. It may take many times before they even start to look around to see if you are coming. Swinging and rocking, if they like those kinds of activities, try doing activities like row, row, row your boat or swing in a stop and go game. Other stop and go games, jumping and bouncing if they're liking jumping and bouncing, jumping on a mini trampoline, bouncing on a big exercise ball. If they like deep pressure, doing some hugs, doing the hot dog game where you roll them up in a blanket or some mats that you find in the center and give them some deep pressure. Spinning is another one. If your child likes to spin, you can either spin them in an office chair. You can spin them in their arms if they're little, but the office chair, it gives you an opportunity to do it without killing your back. All of these games you can do in a stop and go manner. So I use the same words every time, which makes it very predictable so they know what to expect. So for example, I will start with doing a ready, set, go to start the activity. And then I'll comment as I do the activity. So I will use words like swing, 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 or bounce, 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 something like that, and stop. And then when I stop, I pause and wait for some sort of reaction. That reaction may be taking my hands to do it again or doing a word. It's going to take several sessions, several times again to be able to get them to this point. So don't expect it the first time around. You're going to have to do it over and over and over again until they learn the activity. The point of repeating the words in the same way makes it predictable so that they know what to expect when the pause comes and what will come next. Okay. Once you get an interaction going with the people games, you can then move on to some toys. But we're going to move on to some very specific toys, what we call people toys. People toys are ones that the child needs you in order to operate. So examples of these can be ones that we show on the slide here. Bubbles with a very tight lid. Bubbles is an excellent activity. So some children know how to blow bubbles. If they know how to blow bubbles, just put the lid on really tight so that they have to ask you to get the lid off. If they don't know how to blow the bubbles, you can just keep on waiting for them to ask you for more bubbles, and you don't necessarily have to put it on really tight because they still need you to blow the bubbles. Spinning tops, wind-up toys like the little chicken that we see in the picture are also very good people toys. Most young children up until the age 4 or so don't have the fine motor skills in order to wind up those tiny little buttons on the wind-up toys. They need to give it to you in order to request to start that activity.
So now we'll take a look at some different communication strategies that you can use in your center with kids that are not quite talking yet. We'll look at taking turns, wait and listen, get face-to-face, and add. So our first strategy is taking turns. Now, taking turns is quite different than sharing. Sharing is more of a polite kind of activity that we do during play. But in turn taking, we also learn how to wait, how to watch, imitate, share enjoyment with others, and also direct others in the play. So to work on this with kids in your center that are not yet talking, you want to keep the game or the toy really simple so that the only hard part is the taking turns part. You can take turns with the child, or you can be their helper as they take turns with another teacher or with a peer. So some examples that you could do would be to be building a block tower together, where you control the blocks and be handing the blocks over, one to yourself and then one to the child to take turns putting on. It could be completing a simple inset puzzle where again you're controlling the pieces and just giving one to the child at a time and then one for yourself to take a turn. Rolling a ball or a car back and forth is a great turn-taking game, as well as tossing a ball or a beanbag into a target or container, but only having one ball or one beanbag so that you have to share that one item. The next strategy is wait and listen. How we observe kids can help us to learn what they like. It can be really difficult, though, for us as adults to do a lot of waiting and a lot of listening. We tend to be quick to jump in and help. So try to carefully watch how the child is manipulating the toys. What noises or sounds do they make as they play? And how are they asking for help from you or to get things from you? Are they asking with noises? Are they handing you things or leading you to things? Are they pinching or biting or hitting you to get your attention or to get what they want? A lot of kids with autism have slower processing of our words as well. So it's a good idea to count to 5 or even up to 10 before you jump in and join the play. The length of time to wait may vary from child to child. If we wait too long, they may just walk away from you and abandon that play. So it will be a bit of an experiment to find the ideal amount of time to wait before you give that item or before you join into their play. Our next strategy is getting face-to-face. We'd like you to get right down to their level. This doesn't mean forcing eye contact with kids. It just means putting your face at the same kind of level as their face. Or if that's difficult for you to get right down on the floor, on your knees or lying on your side, then bring them up to your level. You could always put a child in a chair while you're sitting in a smaller chair or up in a high chair to be closer to your level. Kids on the spectrum are often distracted by all the sounds and sights around them in a busy childcare center and have trouble filtering out all of those sounds to listen to your directions well. So they will follow directions given right to them at their level a little bit better than those that are given across the room to the whole group. Them seeing your face more clearly will help them to hear and watch your words better, leading them to be able to repeat you one day. The last strategy we'll discuss is called imitate and add. So we will literally just imitate, do what they do with a toy, and add a new action. So we'll do what they do with that toy, even if it's unusual, and we'll add a new action or a word to it. So in this picture example, the boy is pointing to the car. So the teacher does the same action, the point, and also adds the word, car. So first we're going to watch many, many times. That's our experience as children. Then we start to anticipate and understand a concept or a word. And then we will use it. And that's the language, in a word or a sign or a gesture. So it's our job as teachers to increase the number of exposures to that same situation and the same vocabulary every day with these kids. Children who have lots of different experiences will have a really differentiated vocabulary.
So let's talk about music, one of my favorite things in the world. Music can be a very powerful tool. Most children love music, so activities that include music can gain or keep their attention for longer. For most skills, there is a specific area of the brain that controls that specific skill. This is not true for music, as there are many neural pathways that music can take. So if you think about individuals that may have parts of their brain that are damaged through a stroke or traumatic brain injury, there are other pathways that can be taken. This is why individuals that have suffered strokes use music to regain their language and relearn how to communicate. In the same way, we use music for children with delayed or disordered language. So there's some things to keep in mind when we're using music. The first one is I prefer to use my own voice versus recorded music. The reason for this is when you're teaching new vocabulary, you need to be a little bit slower. Recorded music, I find, can be too fast at times for children to keep up and be able to process the information. When you sing, you control the rate at which you go. This also means that you can pause at the important parts and wait for a response. You can't do this with recorded music. So an example of this is one of my favorite songs that I use, or the ones that the children like the most, and Ring Around the Rosie. So this is an activity because the favorite part of this activity, of course, is the falling down part. So when you are holding hands and going around in a circle, before you say the word, we all fall down, you can do we all fall and pause before you say the word down. And don't let the children pull you or go down until they tell you in some manner that they want to fall down. So that may be, if they're nonverbal, pulling on your hands to fall down. When they do that, then you can say the word down and crash to the floor you go. Using visuals in other ways is a good thing as well. So when you use visuals while you sing, you're helping them understand what you're singing about, and you can also use them in order to give them another way to communicate. Examples of this one. I use Old MacDonald a lot because this is a great way to teach animal vocabulary. So I will use toy animals. You can use pictures of animals, whichever one works best and whichever one the child is more interested in. And as I'm singing whichever animal it is, I will show the animal that I'm singing about. Another one is using gestures, so pointing to body parts when singing head, shoulders, knees, and toes. That helps teach body parts, helps the children understand what it is that you're singing about. You can also use pictures to help make choices of songs. So for example, I've used a picture of a boat to mean row, row, row your boat. Picture of a spider to stand for itsy bitsy spider. And this way, a child can make a choice of what song that they want to sing next. I've used these pictures in a number of various ways. I can either just show them just the pictures and let them pull the picture from a Velcro board, or just showing it to them and they can hand you the picture that they want, giving them a choice of two. Sometimes I will use, put them on a dice and let them roll the dice, and that way they can choose a song that way. Letting them pull the pictures out of a little bag, they get to choose as well. Pull the picture and then hand you the picture. It helps them understand what is coming up. For our nonverbal children who are still working on engagement and imitation, Using musical instruments can be helpful. So for example, the little drum that we see on our picture, try using a similar instrument. So if they have a drum, it doesn't necessarily have to be a drum. It could be another container with some sticks, whatever is similar. And try imitating what they are doing. Once you gain their attention, sit in front of them, keep copying what they're doing. Once in a while, they may look up to see what you're doing. Once you get their attention, they may keep going back and forth to make sure that you're following what they're doing. So once you get that back and forth and a little bit of turn taking, then you can switch it up a little bit. When you switch it up, change it just slightly. So you may bang a little bit faster, bang louder, quieter, bang the drumsticks on the floor instead of on the drum. So just something simple like that changes the activity just a little bit, and see if they will imitate you. Working on those imitation skills eventually works toward imitation of sounds, imitation of words, and thus your language is expanding. Think about some of the children in your centers that may have moved from other countries and are learning English as a second language. How do you help them understand and learn? How do they learn new vocabulary? How do they learn to understand the directions that you're giving them? This is how you approach children with language delays and disorders as well. So your children with autism are learning a new language as well. It just may be their first language. So techniques that help a child learn a new language, whether that is their first language, their second language, their third language, all the same. You're probably using many of these already. We just want to bring attention to them a little bit for you. So, speaking simply, you're going to use the language that is one step ahead of where the child is. So just as an example that Erin talked about with the car in that imitate and add slide, if a child is pointing to a car, you can point to the car and say the word car. If the child points to the car and says the word car, then you can add one more word. So red car, oh, fast car, something like that. Typically, you're going to add either an adjective or an action word because they're going to label a noun. Now, this is if you want the child to repeat and express what they want or comment on what they want. If you're giving directions for them to understand, you can probably use 3 or 4 words. They will probably understand that even if they are not saying words yet. Now you can see if they understand if they follow through with the direction. Give them enough time to process and see if they follow. If they don't, then either they've chosen not to follow that direction, which might happen, but you can often tell whether they're choosing not to follow the direction or whether they didn't understand the direction. Again, give enough time so that they can process the direction before saying the direction again. You may have to say it again, or you may have to get closer to them and face to face, like Erin had suggested before as well. Give them enough time to process. Speak a little bit slower. Give some more longer pauses between your words. This doesn't mean talk in an unnatural way. You're still going to use a natural voice, just a little bit slower. Again, using visuals, just like we were talking about with music, to show what you mean. So, for example, the pictures of Row, Row, Row Your Boat and Itsy Bitsy Spider, or the objects like the animals in Old MacDonald help the child understand what it was you're singing about. You may want to use objects, you may want to use some pictures, or you may just want to point to things as you're saying them to help the child understand what it is that you want. Example for those giving a direction of come sit down, you may want to pat the chair when you want them to sit down. Things like that, even just general gestures can also help a child understand what it is that you want them to do.
So let's talk about routines now. Childcare centers are very routine-based. You have all noticed that you have a very predictable flow to your day every day in your center. And within that day, you have many mini routines that the kids will come to predict and understand, and then eventually do on their own with some help and then do completely on their own. Our kids with autism thrive on sameness, even more so than neurotypical kids. They find it calming and comfortable to know what's happening and when, especially when you're not a talker yet yourself, and things are done to you more often than they are done with you. So for routines for our kids with autism, we want them to first understand and start anticipating some of the steps. Then we want them to do some of the steps on their own, be able to listen to and start predicting those familiar words. And then hopefully, with all of this repetition, they'll start to send some messages themselves and be able to do some gestures or maybe some words in part of that routine. And because you're doing the routine together, it works on joint attention. And you'll notice that the kids may be first responding to that familiar routine, that we notice that, say, Johnny can always put things in the garbage, but only after snack time. If you ask him to put anything else in the garbage any other time of the day, he doesn't seem to understand your instruction. So it could be that at first, it's just the familiar routine that after snack, he puts his paper towel in the garbage. And he's followed it because he has watched the cues from the environment, which would be watching the other children do the same thing. Maybe your gestures or your tone of voice as you point to the garbage and indicate that every day. So hand washing is another example. If you didn't realize, hand washing is actually a really complicated routine, and there are 13 steps in that routine. There's the instruction, then you walk there, then you line up, you step up, turn on the tap, you get soap, you scrub, you rinse, the tap gets turned off, you walk to get paper, you dry your hands, you put it in the garbage, then you leave. That's 13 steps. So something as simple sounding as just going to wash your hands is really a very complicated routine, and our kids with autism will have more difficulty memorizing, understanding, and following all of those directions than our neurotypical kids will. So think about those big and small routines in your center and how we can make these, first of all, more consistent so that our kids can anticipate and respond to them, and more concrete for children with autism spectrum disorder. So one of the ways that we can help make our routines more visual is by using photos or picture symbols. Kids with autism spectrum disorder tend to be visual learners. They take in information better when they see it, rather than when they hear it or do it only. So getting back to our washing hands example that we talked about in the last slide, we could use picture strips of all of the different levels of the sequence of washing hands, maybe simplified in 4 or 5 pictures instead of 13, to help our kids understand what they need to do next. Another example would be a picture strip of all of the cold weather clothes that you need when you're getting ready for outside. So you've probably seen some pictures like that in the top left of the screen here. Those are called board maker symbols. And there are various different ways of displaying those kind of symbols, either on the wall or in a small board, or even a little photo album. The bottom of the screen is just showing some very simple baby sign language for eat and more and all done, which is also a way of making our instructions to kids with autism more visual. So another way we can do this is by using visuals for the transitions of the entire day. So we use a first then kind of system pretty often, where you have first, and then you show a picture of bathroom, and then you say then, and you show a picture of, say, your outside play structure. Another example would be first it's painting, and then it's lunchtime. And this will help kids with autism understand what's happening now and what's happening next. We can also use photos or picture symbols for asking for things, so it can become an expressive language system as well. Your speech-language pathologist that comes to your center can help you choose the right vocabulary and the easiest display model for that particular child. And it varies quite a bit from child to child what would be the best. The child might be able to point to the picture, or they might grab the picture or give you the picture that shows what they want or what they're thinking.
So you're probably wanting to know when and how to refer a child for services. So let's talk about a few red flags that may alert you to the need for some speech and language services or something even more such as child development clinic. If your child is not talking by the age of 2 or talking very little by the age of 2, that's a red flag. Even though some doctors may say wait till they're 4, if they're not talking by 2, that's concerning. If they're using any unusual play skills, playing with toys in an unusual way, or if they're not playing with toys at all, that's also a red flag. If they're not playing with others, if they prefer to play with others or will only play with adults, especially around the age of 3, once they hit 3, they should be really playing with some other children. Let's face it, most toddlers don't play a lot with other children. So if they're 2 and not playing with other children, not a big deal. But if they've turned 3 and they're not really paying attention or playing with any other children, that's something to be concerned about. If they get upset with changes in routine and transitions throughout the day, that can be a sign as well. This is not just that I don't want to come in from outside upset, but they get upset with changes in routine throughout the day, more than one time throughout the day. If they're not attending to their name, or if they have poor eye contact. So if they don't look at you when you talk to them, or they don't respond when you call their name, that may be a key thing as well. If they show some unusual movements, such as flicking, dropping, rocking, hand flapping, toe walking, as we talked about before, those are all sensory seeking activities, and that can be a sign of autism. Not always a sign of autism, but it can be. So if you see some of these red flags or you have some concerns, the key thing to do is talk to your supervisor or director about your concerns. Ask them to talk to the parents. Of course, you have to have parental permission to do anything. If the parents are in agreement, they should then go to their pediatrician and ask for a developmental assessment from the Child Development Clinic at the Sky Center. This is where children will get diagnosed with autism. Their pediatricians can't diagnose, speech-language pathologists can't diagnose, only the pediatricians at Child Development Clinic. And unfortunately, it has to go through a pediatrician as well. Speech-language pathologists can't refer, parents can't refer. To get into Child Development Clinic, it has to be the pediatrician that refers. Your center will be asked by CDC to fill out a history or information form once they have the referral form, to give them some ideas on how they're interacting and getting along at your center. Unfortunately, wait list for assessment is a minimum of 12 months unless you get in by a cancellation or something. It's often even longer than that right now. So be willing to wait for a while before you get an assessment. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days to watch our little video. Look forward to part 3 where we would discuss children who are verbal with autism.